Hey guys, Lord Naren White here, the Holy Ghost, the one true God, back with you with the next video in my series reading Oliver Twist by Charles Dickens. Without further ado, returning to Oliver Twist as read by Lord Naren White. With these last words, the Dodger suffered himself to be led off by the collar, threatening, till he got into the yard, to make a parliamentary business of it, and then grinning in the officer's face with great glee and self-approval. Having seen him locked up by himself in a little cell, Noah made the best of his way back to where he had left Master Bates. After waiting here some time, he was joined by the young gentleman, who had prudently abstained from showing himself until he had looked carefully abroad from a snug retreat, and ascertained that his new friend had not been followed by any impertinent person. The two hastened back together, to bear to Mr. Fagin the animating news that Dodger was doing full justice to his bringing up, and establishing for himself a glorious reputation. Chapter 44. The time arrives for Nancy to redeem her pledge to Rose Maylie. She fails. Adept as she was in all the arts of cunning and dissimulation, the girl Nancy could not wholly conceal the effect, with the knowledge of the step she had taken, wrought upon her mind. She remembered that both the crafty Jew and the brutal Sikes had confided to her schemes, which had been hidden from all others, in the full confidence that she was trustworthy, and beyond the reach of their suspicion. Vile as those schemes were, desperate as were their originators, and bitter as were her feelings towards Fagin, who had led her, step by step, deeper and deeper down into an abyss of crime and misery, whence was no escape. Still, there were times when, even towards them, she felt some relenting, lest her disclosure should bring him within the iron grasp he had so long eluded, and he should fall at last, richly as he merited such a fate by her hand. But these were the mere wanderings of a mind unholy to detach itself from old companions and associations, though enabled to fix itself steadily on one object, and resolved not to be turned aside by any consideration. Her fears for Sikes would have been more powerful inducements to recall while there was yet time, but she had stipulated that her secret should be rigidly kept. She had dropped no clue which could lead to this discovery. She had refused, even for his sake, a refuge from all the guilt and wretchedness that encompasses her. And what more could she do? She was resolved. Though all her mental struggles terminated in this conclusion, they forced themselves upon her again and again, and left their traces too. She grew pale and thin, even within a few days. At times, she took no heed of what was passing before her, or no part in conversations where once she would have been the loudest. At other times she laughed without merriment, and was noisy without a moment afterwards. She sat silent and dejected, brooding with her head upon her hands, while the very effort by which she roused herself told more forcibly than even these indications that she was ill at ease, and that her thoughts were occupied with matters very different and distant from those in the course of discussion by her companions. It was Sunday night, and the bell of the nearest church struck the hour. Sikes and the Jew were talking, but they paused to listen. The girl looked up from the low seat on which she crouched, and listened too. 11. "An hour this side of midnight," said Sikes, raising the blind to look out, and returning to his seat. "Dark and heavy it is too. A good night for business, this." "Ah," replied Fagin, "what a pity, Bill, my dear, that there's none quite ready to be done." "You're right for once," replied Sikes gruffly. "It is a pity, for I'm in the humor too." Fagin sighed, and shook his head despondingly. "We must make up for lost time when we've got things into a good train. That's all I know," said Sikes. "That's the way to talk, my dear," replied Fagin, venturing to pat him on the shoulder. "It does me good to hear you." "Does you good, does it?" cried Sikes. "Well, so be it." "Ha ha ha!" laughed Fagin, as if he were relieved by even this concession. "You're like to yourself tonight, Bill. Quite like yourself." "I don't feel like myself, and you lay that withered old claw on my shoulder. So take it away," said Sikes, casting off the Jew's hand. "It makes you nervous, Bill. Reminds you of being nabbed, does it?" said Fagin, determined not to be offended. "Reminds me of being nabbed by the devil," returned Sikes. "There was never another man with such a face as yours, unless it was your father. And I suppose he is singing with his grizzled red beard by this time, unless you came straight away from the old un without any father at all betwixt you, which I shouldn't wonder at a bit." Fagin offered no reply to this compliment, but, pulling Sikes by the sleeve, pointed his finger towards Nancy, who had taken advantage of the foregoing conversation to put on her bonnet, and was now leaving the room. "Hallo!" cried Sikes. "Nance, where's the gal going to at this time of night?" "Not far." "What answer's that?" retorted Sikes. "Do you hear me?" "I do not know where," replied the girl. "Then I do," said Sikes, more in the spirit of obstinacy than because he had any real objection to the girl going where she listed. "Nowhere. Sit down." "I'm not well. I told you that before," rejoined the girl. "I want a breath of air." Put your head out of the window," replied Sikes. "There's not enough there," said the girl. "I want it in the street." "And you won't have it," replied Sikes, with which assurance he rose, locked the door, took the key out, and pulling her bonnet from her head, flung it up to the top of an old press. "There," said the robber. "Now stop quietly where you are, will you?" "It's not such a matter as a bonnet would keep me," said the girl, turning very pale. "What do you mean, Bill? Do you know what you're doing?" "Know what I'm—" "Oh," cried Sikes, turning to Fagin. "She's out of her senses, you know, or she daren't talk to me in that way." "You'll drive me on the something desperate," muttered the girl, placing both hands upon her breast, as though to keep down by force some violent outbreak. "Let me go, will you? This minute! This instant!" "No!" said Sikes. "Tell him to let me go, Fagin. He had better. It'll be better for him, do you hear me?" cried Nancy, stamping her foot upon the ground. "Hear you?" repeated Sikes, turning round in his chair to confront her. "Aye, and if I hear you for half a minute longer, the dog shall have such a grip of your throat as tear some of that screaming voice out. What has come over you, you jade? What is it?" "Let me go," said the girl, with great earnestness. Then, sitting herself down on the floor, before the door, she said, "Bill, let me go. You don't know what you are doing. You don't indeed. For only 1 hour, do. "Cut my limbs off one by one," cried Sikes, seizing her roughly by the arm. "If I don't think the gal's stark raving mad, get up!" "Not till you let me go! Not till you let me go! Never, never!" screamed the girl. Sikes looked on for a minute, watching his opportunity, and suddenly pinioning her hands, dragged her, struggling and wrestling with him by the way, into a small room adjoining, where he sat himself on a bench and, thrusting her into a chair, held her down by force. She struggled and implored by turns that until 12 o'clock had struck, and then, wearied and exhausted, ceased to contest the point any further. With a caution backed by many oaths to make no effort to go out that night, Sikes left her to recover at leisure, and rejoined Fagin. "Whew!" said the housekeeper, wiping the perspiration from his face. "What a precious strange gal that is." "You may say that, Bill," replied Fagin thoughtfully. "You may say that." "What, did she take it into her head to go out tonight, do you think?" asked Sikes. "Come, you should know her better than me. What does it mean?" "Obstinacy. Woman's obstinacy, I suppose, my dear." "Well, I suppose it is," growled Sikes. "I thought I had tamed her, but she's as bad as ever." "Worse," said Fagin thoughtfully. "I never knew her like this for a little cause." "Nor I," said Sikes. "I think she's got a touch of that fever in her blood yet, and it won't come out, eh?" "Like enough. I let her a little blood, without troubling the doctor, if she's took that way again," said Sikes. Fagin nodded an expressive approval of this mode of treatment. And we'll go ahead and stop there for this week. As usual, I want to say thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. Please like, comment, and subscribe, as it greatly helps the channel. Light be with you all. Take care, and thanks again